the redevelopment of Baltimore basically started, and the city was basically, in 1970, the city had basically, was still in the 1950s. This was all shipbuilding all along here. They were still building ships. I lived on this peninsula, which is called South Baltimore. This was solid white, blue-collar working class, and this is a very, very old black community here. One of the oldest black communities in the country, in the north.
And it's still a black?
And it still is.
Okay.
And it is because we fought to keep it that way.
Yeah.
It was, and it's still under tremendous pressure, but there's a group that's doing very good organizing. So in the morning, there'd be men with lunch pails and the whistle blowing going down to the shipyards to make ship. This is 1970. And so between 70 and 80, it got real quiet, literally. The ship whistles stop and the machinery of the ship and the shipyards closed. And over a period of years, you could almost hear the industrial revolution ending.
Yeah,
You know, you just got quieter and quieter and quieter, and people started leaving and houses started being abandoned. So around 1975, 1980, the city really almost died completely. I mean, the jobs were going, all the industrial jobs going, and the working class people, the white working class people who were given subsidies moved to the suburbs, and the black population, which was locked out of those subsidies, basically started taking over those older communities. And in South Baltimore, what happened, and this is where it really began in my neighborhood, and we fought it unsuccessfully, is that middle-class people who just started working downtown started buying houses down here. So at any rate, so this started developing, and then Fells Point started developing, and basically it spread from Fells Point in this area, and now it's spreading along the harbor. So white working class people were moved this direction. The black population was moved out in this direction. The gentrification then started moving in this way, and then this became white middle class. I worked with this community initially, and now a whole bunch of other people have joined them in saving this as a black community. But this has been an enormous struggle. This area here, called Audubon, what they did is they said they were going to run the highway through here, moved everyone out, and then said, oh, we're not going to run the highway through there, and sold the houses to yuppies for yuppie, the word yuppie? For $1. And basically sold these people's neighborhood to middle-class people moving into the downtown for $1, you know? And so then this whole area, this area here always stayed fairly middle class. This was the wealthiest area. This is Mount Vernon, which is right there. And so we're right here. This is the freeway right there, and this is the cemetery. And so this is the square we're in. And so the pressures move this way and move this way. This is East Baltimore right here, which we'll drive through, and this is West Baltimore. And these two areas are incredibly poor. The median income, which means is $15,000 in this neighborhood. Incredible poverty here. And this whole area is very poor. What's going on now is this is Johns Hopkins Hospital. And we'll drive through here. What they did is they had the city take services away, so they didn't pick up garbage that much, and they didn't fix up the houses, and they let the place get rat infested. They basically created a neighborhood that was so undesirable that the people who had the ability to fight back moved out. And who was left was the people who didn't have that capacity. And then they started offering them money, very, very little money, and people didn't want to live there anymore because it was so undesirable, and they took the money. And so it took, and Betty Robinson is involved with this also, it took quite a while for people to realize that the people left there to fight back, and they finally formed an organization to fight back. But Hopkins basically has decided that they want this.
Okay.
And so this railroad track, what they've decided is they're going to take everything from Hopkins up to the railroad track, and then link this, and then what they'll do is they'll start trying to take this next, and move in this direction. So this is still very poor, this is still very poor, and Hopkins is basically moving out from this area and will link down here. So the idea is to but there's no place to go. Where most of the black population that got moved got pushed this way into Park Heights. This was the old Jewish community was Baltimore Street, was down here. It then moved here, and as the black population got pushed away from here, it moved to this area. The black population continued to be moved up, and now the Jewish community is up here. Enormous Jewish community. And it's also a lot of Russian Jews, a lot of European Jews that live up here as well, that's the immigrant population. This is extremely wealthy up here. This is very, very wealthy, and this is still white working class. And there's some movement this way. But this is really the disaster area right in here. This is enormous poverty, very, very high crime rate. This is really a disaster area, as is this. And this corridor, the reason this neighborhood is so key is because right now you can live down here and go up here and go into the rich community without ever seeing these communities at all.
That's what we have been doing all the time.
Right. So this is the
We're going up there and then we live
It's like
in
the
the...
map here.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's right. And so they just cut that out, and so the two ways of viewing the city is, one way of viewing the city is this area right here, like this. What our way of viewing the city is this becomes a link between the two black and poor communities. And so we become the link between these two communities and become a cultural center that draws energy into this and bring energy back out.
That's your idea.
Right. So those are and it's very, very clear. Anybody you talk to is basically either sees the city like this or sees the city like this. And it's a sort of metaphor for how people view the city. And so the line we're drawing is to stop gentrification here. So we're fighting for stopping the expansion here. We're fighting for stopping the expansion here. We're fighting for stopping the expansion up here. Kids on the Hill and other groups up there. So there's this line here that it's being pushed this way, and we're sort of pushing back. I'm describing this as though this was much more on purpose, and it isn't clear yet. There's no consistent plan. Baltimore has more unused factory space than any city in the United States. And what we're looking at is ways to rebuild industry. We really believe that communication and information will be international, but that we will really fight for localizing agriculture and production of goods. That there's a chance of bringing that back in, because when you produce goods, then you get this tremendous recirculation of dollar. You get the raw materials coming in, and you get people buying it, and you get contractors and subcontractors and distribution. And so the way that new industry is you can have very small units producing things. And so, but to do that, you need to pass laws that basically say that any time that you're buying products or services locally, that you need to always first of all, choose local companies. And that is exactly the opposite of what NAFTA is doing. So really what we're doing is we're going to war with NAFTA. even though
That's
the
dangerous.
communities don't really understand that yet. It's a long education process. But there was a bill that the United States is setting up things just like NAFTA, except with 4 or 5 Central American countries right now, where the whole free trade agreement, and there was a letter that the governor signed that said that Maryland is part of it, no matter what's written in the future. So we don't know what's in it. He just signed saying, whatever it is they come up with, we're part of it. And so somebody we knew in the legislature, we got AFL-CIO and a lot of community groups got together and went down there and basically said to the Republicans, to the conservatives, if you call yourself conservatives, why are you supporting this? This is against states' rights. It's against national sovereignty. It's against small business locally. You know, as conservatives, why would you want this? This is hypocrisy. And we killed it. We got legislation passed that threw the letter out. And the governor then vetoed it, and we overrode the veto. That just happened like 2 weeks ago. No, there's some people living in just squatting in houses, but mostly they're paying rent. They pay, $300 or $400. For some of the houses, $400 or $500, and sometimes there's many, many people living in the house. So it's the only way they can afford it. But some of the houses are in horrible shape. I mean, the roof is leaking and it's coming apart, and rats, and so it's in really bad shape. So what I do for a living is I do trainings and write documents on dealing with lead paint and asthma triggers. It's not such an issue in Europe because Europe stopped using lead paint around 1900. But this country kept using it up until 1978.
So people still have problems.
So, well, it's the kids. The lead paint comes off the walls, and the kids put it in their mouth, and it's 75% of the people in prison have high lead levels because it really results in violent behavior. It's hard to function. It's hard to does brain
that's what
damage.
comes out of, okay.
And so it really has tremendous impacts on the community as a whole. To say nothing of the family itself.
Yeah.
And also asthma, which is moisture and roaches and mold and things like that. So I put together programs where I train community people to go into the house and fix those problems.
Okay.
The Ford Foundation gave a grant to neighborhoods that had a transportation hub. So we have the bus routes, the train station, the light rail, subway, so we have all this. And so the idea was that you take poor communities and people can get on this transportation and go out to the suburbs for jobs. And we said, no, we want the opposite. We want the jobs here. We want people in the suburbs coming in here and spending their money here. And so we are part of the decision-making process on who they choose. And we've contacted radical planners from this area to get them to apply for this, so that the plan that gets developed is sympathetic with our vision for the neighborhood. This to us is very, very important, because if we can move light industry in there, then we keep the industrial nature of the neighborhood. So this corner, this is the beginning of this incredibly poor community. And you'll see up here we'll go. And the prison, that's the prison right up there. So this whole neighborhood is sort of built around the prison. Extremely high, drug levels here. And so what we're interested in is trying to take control of like old factory buildings like that, and turning them back into production. This community is one of the most impoverished communities in the country, and Hopkins has basically decided that they want this land, and they want everything from the hospital to the railroad tracks. Those are where you see that wall right there. That's the railroad tracks. It's right there. Shot up the grade. The clock struck. So this is a hospital that's making children sick for profit, and driving people out of their homes and destroying a community. It's just amazing, and they have worked with a foundation to create an organization, and that organization, there's an expression called a flak catcher, and what a flak was when a bomb explodes and you have a shield that catches it before it hits anything. So what it means is that they've created this neighborhood organization that shields Hopkins from directly doing it, that is paid money to service the people and give them just enough to get them out and keep them quiet. This was a very strong community organization right there, run by a woman named Lucille Gorham, who was leader in this community. And Hopkins gave her money to be quiet, gave her staff money to be quiet. They've just one by one closed this down, but there's a core of people that can't be bought. And Betty Robinson is one of the leaders of that group that's working with the neighborhood. But the problem is that they've pushed the most articulate people out of the neighborhood. So it's hard to organize in a doomed neighborhood, in a neighborhood with no hope. The organization, which is right around the corner, that they formed, and it's interesting, they formed this new organization right next to the ruins of the old organization. It has enormous money, a real fancy building. They're in an old school building, big conference rooms and everything else. That organization was set up, in their words, to serve the community, to help the community through its transition, to find people housing and so forth and so on. We know what they were set up to do. They've just put out a proposal to educate the neighborhood. And education means when they tear down buildings, you need to close your windows and clean up dust and so forth. So it's basically saying, if you get poisoned, it's your fault.
Next one.
This lot has been like this for 5 years. So this is a remnants of a family that's been evicted out of a house.
They also do that. That's because they didn't pay the rent, or
Right.
what else will make you from? Yeah.
It's like living in a war zone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this is the border, and this is the neighborhood we're going to start organizing in. Because this isn't in the phase 1, this is phase 2.
So how do you organize people? How do you do that?
ACORN goes to every door and gets people to, one of the things that keeps them committed is that they sign a piece of paper where $10 gets taken out of their bank every month and goes to ACORN to support ACORN. So they're putting money into ACORN consistently, so they start making demands on ACORN, which is what gets them active.
Oh yeah.
Because they feel ACORN owes them things, and so it works to keep them active in the organization.
Are they willing to pay that, those $10?
2,000 very, very low-income people are paying that. And there's no doubt the government brought crack into the low-income communities in this straight ahead in this country. And it's positive that happened. There's no question about it. That there was a real fear, and so they had to kill King, they had to kill Malcolm X. They brought guns and drugs into the community, and they just broke the back of any attempt to organize. There's industries in Baltimore, in the prisons, where people are paid $1.25 a day.
Yeah.
That's not an hour; that's a day.
So you get free labor.
It's called slavery.
Yeah, it's slavery.
It has a very exact name. 40% of black men are someplace in the prison system. They're either in prison or on parole or on trial or something. It's fascism, you know. It's just, but it's done with such legal structures and so systematized and so bureaucratized that it's brilliantly disguised, you know.
Yeah.
There's no goose stepping going on. I want a picture here. If you'd pull over.
Yeah.
Behind the truck.
In front of that truck.
Yeah. All the...
Oh, they are. Look at this. Putting down the house.
They're going to be very unhappy we're taking pictures of this. I'd like to get a shot of when that dust comes off the top. Like now. No,
See it in there. You can see it in your house.
Yeah. They're claiming that when they hose it down, there's no dust. Okay. Yeah, I just want to get a still picture. Oh, just that all of the that all of the water that they're putting on that site, it runs down the gutter, and the lead comes out and settles in all these cracks. And then when kids come in there, they pick that lead up on their feet, and that lead's going into every single one of these houses on the block. And the workers have been told to not wear dust masks because it'll make the neighbors think that that they're being put in danger. Now this is public housing.
Yeah.
So this is all subsidized federal money, but they're going to close all this down and move all these people out because they want this land, because this is in between that development and the inner harbor. So they don't want this here. So this is all going to go. We're just going to go across town and then see the other large community. That's even larger than this community. This is Charles Street, and this is the richest street. This is where all the fancy restaurants are, and the penis statue, the famous penis statue. And
yeah, this is the area where we are.
And this is the library here, right? You're going to need to get over.
Yeah.
So this is very, very wealthy. And where the city is now putting all of its money, it's in two places. One is Hopkins, where we just were, to clear that out. That's all the public money is going to support Hopkins, even though they're the richest institution in the country. And this is the other place the money's going, this street, to develop there's a big musical being developed down there and everything. So they're redeveloping this area. That's where the public money's going now. This road here only goes for 1 mile, this highway here, and it destroyed this community. And then we fought and fought and fought and stopped it. So a mile up, it just ends in a wall. You can see these are beautiful old houses. So this used to be a neighborhood that had money in it, but it's now very, very poor, and enormous amount of drug trafficking here. About a third of this neighborhood is abandoned. In some places it's much more, in some places it's left.
Yeah.
Not there's this now it improves a little bit here because the minister of this church right here is pretty radical, and he has worked to help fix up this area right here. This is called Harlem Park. So this little area is a little bit better, and then you'll see very quickly it gets terrible again. Over half this neighborhood over here is abandoned. It's just mile after mile after mile like this. And it probably looks like this for 3 miles that way. In the 60s and 70s, like there was a church, Bethel AME Church, and they led the anti-apartheid movement in not just Baltimore, but nationally. They were very important. The American Civil Rights Movement came out of Baltimore and came out of the Baltimore churches in this neighborhood. The head of that church right now drives a Mercedes, wears $800 suits, and is trying to move the church to the suburbs. That's the same church that was the center of the anti-apartheid movement. So the black church in this country has just given up, just moved to the other side.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of and the Bush administration has given a lot of money to the churches.
Oh yeah.
And so the churches become the
he works for the government.
tools to put the communities back to sleep again.
Yeah.
Yesterday, there were 2 clients who were going to come in to sign paper returns.
The assistant head city
I
health
keep
Ken.
thinking of trees.
Ken, listen to this for a sec.
Except I'd want one that's
This is from this article
6 feet tall.
that Glenda's in.